Chosen one of the most misunderstood forms of power is the ability to know the truth and say nothing. Most people think strength means immediately confronting a lie. They think wisdom means exposing every contradiction the moment it appears. They think intelligence means proving to the room that you already know what is happening. But true discernment often looks very different. Sometimes the strongest move is silence. Sometimes the strongest move is allowing a person to continue talking while you quietly observe. Because there is nothing more dangerous than looking a liar directly in the eyes and politely letting them finish their rehearsed script. They smiled, thinking they had you completely fooled. They didn't know you were running a full spiritual autopsy, logging every single contradiction for the final checkmate. That is the mistake manipulators often make. They assume silence means ignorance. They assume calmness means confusion. They assume a lack of confrontation means a lack of awareness. And because they believe that, they become comfortable. Too comfortable. They start talking more than they should. They start explaining things that were never questioned. They start adding details that expose their motives. They start revealing information that no one asked for. All because they believe the chosen one cannot see what is happening. But the chosen one sees more than they realize. Not just words, patterns, not just stories, energy, not just explanations, intentions. That is why the loudest people are often the easiest to read. They reveal themselves through excess. Excess talking, excess explaining, excess defending, excess performing. The more desperate someone becomes to control a narrative, the more clues they leave behind. And today, we are going to talk about the brutal reality of letting someone lie directly to your face. Why interrupting too early can cost you valuable insight. Why silence is often a form of spiritual intelligence. And why some of your greatest victories happened because you chose observation over reaction. One of the biggest misconceptions people have about discernment is that it begins with words. It doesn't. By the time words are spoken, the story has often already started revealing itself. Chosen one of your greatest gifts has never been the ability to hear what people say. It has been the ability to notice what they cannot hide. The slight hesitation before an answer. The change in tone when a certain subject appears. The forced smile that arrives a second too late. The nervous shift in energy when truth gets too close to the surface. Most people are listening to sentences. You are listening to patterns. That is the art of spiritual eavesdropping. Not spying. Not paranoia. Observation. Because long before manipulation becomes visible through actions, it often leaks through behavior. People reveal themselves in fragments. A glance. A pause. A contradiction. A sudden change in attitude. Small details that seem insignificant on their own, but become powerful when viewed together. And this is where chosen ones often confuse themselves. You feel something is off. You notice inconsistencies. You sense hidden motives. But because you lack concrete proof, you begin doubting yourself. You tell yourself you're overthinking. You tell yourself you're imagining things. You tell yourself you're being too sensitive. Meanwhile, your discernment is quietly collecting data. Read that again. Your discernment is quietly collecting data. Because intuition rarely arrives as a complete picture. More often, it arrives as a series of small signals. One inconsistency, then another. One strange reaction, then another. One unexplained feeling, then another. Eventually the pieces connect. And suddenly what seemed invisible becomes obvious. That is why manipulators often dislike highly intuitive people. Not because intuitive people always know everything immediately, but because they keep noticing things that should have gone unnoticed. The energy doesn't match the words. The timing doesn't match the story. The reaction doesn't match the situation. And over time, those mismatches become impossible to ignore. What makes this gift so powerful is that it requires no confrontation. You do not need to argue. You do not need to accuse. You do not need to force confessions. You simply observe. You let people reveal themselves. And the more they talk, the more information becomes available. That is why many chosen ones appear quiet in situations where others would immediately react. They are not frozen. They are not confused. They are gathering information. They are allowing patterns to form before drawing conclusions. Because once a pattern becomes clear, truth no longer needs to be forced. It reveals itself. And that is what makes spiritual eavesdropping so powerful. While everyone else is focused on the performance, you are paying attention to the leaks. And eventually, every hidden motive leaks. One of the hardest lessons a chosen one learns is that interrupting a lie too early can actually work against you. At first, this feels completely backwards. When you know someone is being dishonest, your natural instinct is to stop them, to challenge the story, to point out the contradiction, to expose the flaw in their narrative before it spreads any further. But experienced manipulators are prepared for that. They expect resistance. They expect confrontation. They expect emotional reactions. In many cases, they have rehearsed for it. That is why interrupting too early often gives them exactly what they want. The conversation shifts away from their behavior and becomes focused on your reaction. Instead of revealing themselves, they begin defending themselves. Instead of continuing their performance, they start adjusting it, and valuable information gets lost. That is why discernment requires patience. Because every lie has a lifespan. Every deception eventually expands beyond what the liar can manage. The more someone talks, the more details they must remember. The more stories they create, the more contradictions they must maintain. The more they attempt to control perception, the more opportunities they create for the truth to surface. That is why chosen ones often appear unusually calm when they detect dishonesty. Not because they believe the lie, not because they are unaware, because they understand something important. People reveal far more when they think they are succeeding. Read that again. People reveal far more when they think they are succeeding. The moment a manipulator believes you are convinced, they relax. Their guard drops. Their confidence increases. They begin saying things they never planned to say. They become careless with details. They expose motives they intended to hide. And suddenly the picture becomes much clearer. What started as a small inconsistency turns into a pattern. What started as a suspicion turns into confirmation. What started as a feeling turns into understanding. That is why silence can be such a powerful tool. Not passive silence. Intentional silence. The kind of silence that allows a person enough space to reveal themselves completely. Because the goal is not simply to catch a lie. The goal is to understand the full scope of the manipulation. How deep does it go? How long has it been happening? Who is involved? What is the actual motive? Those answers rarely appear during the first contradiction. They appear after the person keeps talking, and talking, and talking, until eventually they build a case against themselves. That is the irony. Many manipulators believe they are controlling the conversation when they are actually exposing themselves. They think they are writing the narrative when they are quietly revealing the blueprint behind it. Meanwhile, the chosen one remains calm, observing, listening, connecting patterns, allowing the truth to fully emerge before making a move. Because once the full picture becomes visible, there is no need to argue. The evidence speaks for itself. And by that point, the person did most of the work on their own. There comes a point in every chosen one's journey when they stop asking a certain question. How did I know? Because if you're honest, there have been moments when you sensed something long before logic could explain it. You felt the shift before the betrayal happened. You noticed the energy before the mask slipped. You recognized the motive before there was any visible evidence to support it. And that can be unsettling. Not because the insight is wrong, because it arrives before the facts. Most people trust information only after it becomes visible. Chosen ones often experience something different. They feel the disturbance before the event. They sense the inconsistency before the contradiction appears. They detect the hidden agenda before the behavior becomes obvious. That is why so many chosen ones spend years doubting themselves. They are waiting for proof of something they already know. Read that again. They are waiting for proof of something they already know. This is what many describe as ancestral insight. Not guesswork, not paranoia, not random suspicion. A deeper knowing that activates when something threatens your peace, your purpose, or your path. It operates beneath conscious thought. Before the mind forms a conclusion, something inside you is already paying attention. A tone feels wrong. An explanation feels incomplete. An interaction feels forced. A situation feels misaligned. You may not be able to explain it immediately, but the signal is there. And over time, experience teaches you to respect that signal. Because how many times have you ignored it only to discover later that it was right? How many times did your spirit recognize danger while your mind was still searching for evidence? How many times did you talk yourself out of what you sensed, only to watch the truth reveal itself months later? That pattern is not accidental. It is protection. The chosen one was never designed to rely solely on what can be seen. Discernment exists because some threats announce themselves through energy long before they reveal themselves through action. That is why your intuition becomes stronger as you heal. The more noise you remove from your life, the easier it becomes to hear. The more drama you release, the clearer the signal becomes. The more aligned you become with your purpose, the more accurate your discernment grows. And this is where manipulators make a fatal mistake. They think deception only needs to fool your eyes. They forget about your spirit. They spend enormous effort crafting appearances, rehearsing stories, and managing perceptions. Yet despite all that effort, something still feels off. Something still refuses to align. Because truth and deception carry different frequencies. And your spirit notices. That is why many chosen ones appear almost impossible to fool for long. They may not react immediately. They may not confront immediately. They may not even fully understand what they are sensing at first. But eventually the pieces connect. And when they do, the insight that once felt mysterious suddenly becomes obvious. You didn't imagine it. You detected it before it became visible. And that gift has been protecting you far longer than you realize. There is a moment every manipulator secretly fears, and it is not the confrontation. It is not the argument. It is not even being exposed publicly. The moment they truly fear is realizing that your silence was never confusion. It was observation. For most of the interaction, they felt comfortable. They believed the performance was working. They believed their story was being accepted. They believed they were controlling the narrative and guiding the outcome exactly as planned. And that confidence is what makes the realization so devastating when it finally arrives. You see, manipulators survive on feedback. They need reactions. They need emotional responses. They need visible signs that their words are creating confusion, guilt, fear, or doubt. Every facial expression, every defensive explanation, every emotional outburst gives them information. That information allows them to adjust their strategy and maintain control. But when you remain calm, something unusual happens. The feedback disappears. And when the feedback disappears, their certainty disappears with it. Suddenly they cannot tell what you know. They cannot tell what you suspect. They cannot tell whether you believe them, doubt them, or have already seen through the entire performance. That uncertainty becomes uncomfortable, then stressful, then deeply unsettling. The longer your calmness continues, the more pressure begins shifting onto them. At first, they become more talkative. They start adding details nobody requested. They begin explaining things that were never questioned. Then they start defending themselves against accusations that were never made. Before long, contradictions begin appearing. The mask starts slipping. The carefully rehearsed story becomes harder to maintain, because silence creates space. And inside that space, people often reveal far more than they intended. That is the calm trap. Not a trap built from manipulation. A trap built from patience. You simply allow the person enough room to keep talking. Enough room to become comfortable. Enough room to believe they are succeeding. And in that comfort, they slowly begin exposing themselves. The irony is powerful. The reaction they wanted from you becomes the reaction they start experiencing themselves. They wanted you nervous, but now they are nervous. They wanted you uncertain, but now they are uncertain. They wanted you questioning yourself, but now they are questioning what you know. Meanwhile, you remain exactly the same. Calm, centered, observant. And that contrast creates enormous pressure because deep down, most manipulators understand something important. A calm person is difficult to control. An emotional person can be redirected. A panicked person can be pressured. A reactive person can be predicted. But a calm person forces everyone else to reveal themselves. That is why highly observant chosen ones make certain people uncomfortable without saying a word. It is not because you are threatening them. It is because your presence removes their ability to hide behind performance. Your silence becomes a mirror. Your calmness becomes a spotlight. And suddenly they are forced to confront their own behavior. By the time they realize what is happening, it is often too late. The contradictions have already surfaced. The motives have already leaked through. The truth has already begun revealing itself. And that is the terrifying realization they never planned for. The person they thought was confused was actually gathering information the entire time. The person they thought was fooled was actually paying attention. The person they thought they were controlling was quietly watching the whole performance unfold. That is why nothing unsettles deception more than a chosen one who sees clearly, stays calm, and refuses to react before the truth fully reveals itself. The greatest victory was never exposing them. The greatest victory was leaving with your peace intact. Because many people imagine checkmate as some dramatic moment, a public confrontation, a perfect speech, a crushing revelation that leaves the other person speechless. But chosen one, the most powerful checkmate often happens in silence. It happens when you finally understand everything you needed to understand and realize there is nothing left to argue about. That is the moment the game ends. Not because you won an argument, because you no longer need one. For a long time, manipulators depended on emotional access. They depended on your reactions. They depended on your need to be understood. They depended on your willingness to keep engaging, explaining, defending, and revisiting the same situations over and over again. But once you saw the full picture, something changed. You stopped chasing clarity from people committed to confusion. You stopped seeking honesty from people invested in deception. You stopped demanding accountability from people determined to avoid it. And most importantly, you stopped giving away your energy. Read that again. You stopped giving away your energy. That is where the real checkmate happened. Because the moment you walked away cleanly, the power dynamic shifted forever. The person who depended on controlling your emotions suddenly lost access. The person who relied on keeping you trapped in endless conversations suddenly found themselves talking to an empty room. The person who expected another reaction was met with silence. Not wounded silence. Peaceful silence. That distinction matters. Because peaceful silence communicates something powerful. The lesson has been learned. The pattern has been recognized. The access has been revoked. And there is nothing more frustrating for a manipulator than realizing they can no longer reach the version of you they once controlled. That is why your calm departure carried so much power. You did not need revenge. You did not need a final explosion. You did not need to destroy them. You simply saw clearly, trusted what you saw, and moved forward. And in doing so, you left them with the one thing they never expected to face: the consequences of their own behavior. So if there is one thing I want you to remember from this message, chosen one, it is this: trust what you quietly observe. Not every truth arrives with dramatic evidence. Not every warning comes with an announcement. Sometimes your greatest protection comes from the small details, the subtle shifts, the quiet signals your spirit notices long before your mind can explain them. That is why you must never underestimate the power of observation. Your silence was not weakness. Your patience was not confusion. Your calmness was not ignorance. It was wisdom gathering information. It was discernment collecting evidence. It was your spirit protecting you before the full picture became visible. And if you have been questioning yourself lately, let this be your confirmation. The reason you notice certain things before everyone else is because you were paying attention. The reason the truth eventually revealed itself is because patterns always reveal what performances try to hide. So keep trusting your discernment. Keep protecting your peace. Keep allowing people to reveal themselves instead of forcing explanations. And most importantly, keep choosing observation over impulsive reaction. Because the chosen one's greatest advantage has never been the ability to control others. It has been the ability to see clearly. If this message spoke directly to your spirit today, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with another chosen one who needs this reminder. And in the comments, type, "I trust what I observe," because truth always leaves clues for those patient enough to notice them.